Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with a really exciting knife consult for you today on the Direware Tailwhip. It's been really exciting for me to get a Direware knife on the channel. I will say in my earliest days of sort of knife craziness, the Direware Solo was a knife that I definitely coveted. It sort of busted onto the scene and became sort of the definition of an overbuilt knife for a little while. It was sort of the first knife, at least to me, that caught my attention for being big and beefy and overbuilt. It's very wide. The blade is really wide, and it all came with these crazy grinds. But over time, Direware has developed a series of new models and have gotten a little bit more into the more normal looking knives, especially with this tail whip model. The tail whip is going to be the longest overall knife that they have in their lineup, but it may be the most reasonable overall in terms of its EDC ability. I have never held a Solo or one of the Hyper 90s or some of the other ones that are pretty awesome, and I really hope that I get to do that one day. Maybe some very nice viewer will send me a Solo to handle finally. But I was very thankful to get this one in hand. This is one of their newest models, and this is one of those situations where I think the old adage comes into play where it says, don't meet your heroes. Because I'm a little bit disappointed, and we're going to get into why, but we're going to take a look at this knife the way that we always do. We're going to start out with some vital signs. We'll go ahead and check out the numbers right here. Up front, you're looking at about 3.75 inches of overall blade length. You're looking at about 8.75 inches of overall length. The handle here is coming in at about 5.2 inches, and if you include the forward finger choil, 5.5 inches of grip area. Back here, you're looking at about 4.25 inches of grip area. The handle thickness, these nice slabs of titanium are coming in at exactly 1/2 inch, so not overly thick. And the blade stock is 157 thousandths, a very standard blade stock. So let's bring out another couple of knives for a size comparison. It's interesting to me that Direware is really known for making big overbuilt knives, and this is the longest one in their, the longest one, literally, in their series, but it's really not overly huge. If you take a look, it's a hair bigger than the Paramilitary 2 and much bigger than this Para 3 right here. I'll bring out the large knife, the Benchmade Crooked River right here, which is a 4-inch blade that is still significantly larger. So you can see that they've certainly tried to target a long but sort of thinner knife than what they're used to building. So let's go ahead and break this knife down anatomically and see what we're working with. Up front is a blade of M390 done in a distressed DLC look right here. These blades come in a variety of finishes, and depending on the spec of the knife, the price will be slightly different. From what I could see, these knives ranged from about the 850 to the 1,000 sort of range, depending on the spec that was chosen. I don't know the exact price of this one because this was sent to me by a viewer named Josh Zinn. He goes by Old Sluggy and a few other handles on Instagram, and he's a very popular guy. So thanks, Josh, for sending this knife along for review. But back to the blade, this thing is done in a compound grind where there is a hollow grind done here on the primary bevel, a flat grind done out there at the tip. There is a nice swedge, and then the tip itself is actually sort of snubbed. Some people call that a snub nose. I think Gavco calls his snub nose trashers when he does that. So it reinforces the tip and makes it really strong, but it still gives you the stabbing ability going on there. There are some nice flats going on. The grind only goes up about 2/3 of the way of the blade, but it is thin enough behind the edge. This is a rather practical looking blade from Direware. It comes with an almost mirror polished edge right there, and it's crazy, crazy sharp. This is a pretty practical blade in terms of their lineup. Normally they've got these recurve, super thick, crazy compound grinds, and you know, this is a pretty useful grind right here. I'm not gonna lie, this is probably the most useful grind I've seen them do. There is a little bit of some jimping up top here, and there is a nice forward finger choil. I always appreciate it when knife makers include this forward finger choil on these larger knives. It gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you handle the knife and how you can do some finer work with larger knives. So I do like that very much. Moving back to the pivot, this thing runs on ball bearings. I did open this knife up. It has a unique solution for fixing the pivot in place so that it doesn't freely rotate. If you can look very closely here, there's a little dot right there on this pivot face. Underneath that dot, a ball bearing has been press fit into the underside of this face. And then there is a little divot that's been milled into the titanium so that that ball bearing goes into that pivot, and so as you're tightening down on the pivot, it does not move out of place and stays in place. The pivot and the ball bearings are very smooth. As you can see, the knife really just likes to fly closed, and it drops shut very smoothly. A very, very clean action going on right there. And the detent is tuned very nicely. I will say something about the action right here. The flipper tab, although it is functional, is rounded in such a way, and it is jimpless in such a way that it is quite easy to actually slide off. The detent is quite strong on this knife, and so if you're not paying attention, it's very easy, even if you're a good knife dude and the experienced knife dude, that you're going to miss that, and sometimes you'll misfire it a little bit just because it's very smooth. If I could make any recommendation, it would be to add a little bit of jimping to that. What you'll also notice is that the thing is even polished, so it's just not a very high traction surface. It's very pleasant to the fingertip, like doesn't violate my finger, but it's one of those, there you go, where it's one of those weird situations where it does need a little bit more traction. Something interesting about the design of this knife, perhaps you'll notice as I open the knife here that you can see the stop pin. It's an internal stop pin. It's traveling inside the handle, but as I open the knife, it moves from that position to this position, and it's kind of a neat touch. Functionally, that's not really doing anything. It's just revealing the stopped position along an internal track on the inside of the knife handle right there. But it is an interesting thing, and it's certainly cool kind of when you open the knife to watch it go from one side. Oh, see? It's really hard to catch that sometimes to the other side. You can see I'm trying to actually actuate the knife. I'm not trying to just do that. Anyways, so that's a neat little visual touch right there. Moving back to the handles, there are these nice pieces of titanium right here. It is a titanium frame lock right there, and it's got a very large and robust titanium pocket clip. I think this pocket clip is a carryover from some of the other knives, and it's way too big for the size of this knife. I really think that this knife would be better suited with a substantially smaller clip, but that is in keeping with the Direware lineage of these huge overbuilt knives. It's got a nice anodized titanium black backspacer, and you can see that the edges of the titanium clip have also been anodized blue for a nice visual pop. I will say I was a bit disappointed in this knife, and that's because when you deploy the knife and you get to lockup, the lockup is close to 50%, maybe even a bit more. And the lock interface, actually, there's not a lot of traction. This is something that I've discussed with a couple of knife makers. The way that the lockup happens, you feel ever so slightly, just maybe a hair of lock play, of up and down play, and there's just no effort to disengaging the lock. And what that says to me is that over time, this lock with no lock bar insert is going to start having some difficulty with accurate lockup. This lock is going to continue to travel farther over, and it may not be the best engineered piece ever. There's a tiny hair of up and down play that I have really tried to get rid of. Like I said, I disassembled it, put it all back together, and it's there. There is an over travel stop that's built in. It's actually like a tungsten carbide rod, it looks like, that's built in to the inside of the lock bar, and it actually catches on that little notch right there, so that works very well. This is a difficult situation where I really wanted to get a Direware in hand, and ultimately I was a bit disappointed because of especially this lockup geometry right here. I don't think that this necessarily represents the entire line of Direware knives. Their story has been told and their knives have been reviewed, and people know that they make a high quality piece, so I'd really like to get some more in hand. If you have a Direware Solo or something equivalent to that, let me know down in the comments, and I'd love to try to review one on the channel and do Direware a solid. I don't try to come out making negative reviews, but sometimes these things happen. I wanted to say thanks to my friend Josh for sending this along. I wanted to recommend that you guys go ahead and click like and subscribe to my channel. Go ahead and check me out on Instagram as Dr. Frunkey. Check out Direware Knives on Instagram and their website, direware.com. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, take care.